everyone.
Hi.
Welcome to Waves of Wisdom. I'm your host, Ariel, and
I'm Danielle.
And we're glad that you're tuning in with us today. Today we're talking about play and therapy, how to use it at home to promote some language skills, some fine motor skills, sensory skills. Before we get all into that, we would like to recap last episode. We were in Neurodiversity 101, and we did have some questions. So thank everyone for, listening and engaging with us, because this stuff is very important to us. It's stuff we use every day in our practice and teaching others. So we're excited that other people are interested in learning.
Okay, so there were a couple questions in regards to neurodiversity and neurodiversity affirming practices. The first one that we kind of saw a trend was if giftedness would be considered a form of neurodiversity.
Right. So giftedness, the idea that some children excel in early development, excel in whether it's math, science, language. The answer is absolutely. Giftedness is a neurodiverse functioning brain,
yes.
Right?
So when we talk about neurodiversity, we kind of recapped and kind of in a nutshell put it in a manner of, it's just a different way of your brain taking the information and processing it so that way you can learn, whether it's on the more challenging side for some of our kids or that it comes very easy to them and they're having to continue to input more information and more information. That would be more on our gifted side of neurodiversity. So yes, it is considered neurodiverse to be labeled.
So yes, giftedness, and we talk about like the spectrum of learning and brain functioning, and that just, it shows, right? Like there's some levels of this neurodiversity affirming practice in that we just basically treat someone as an individual. Does that mean that, you have and you're excelling in a bunch of things? Absolutely, it could mean that. Could it mean that you need more support in different subjects? Absolutely, it could mean that too. It's very much individualized, right?
Very much so. Our second question that we saw trending was, how can I advocate for my child who is considered neurodiverse?
Yes, great question. And I think especially as kids go into that school age, parents start having, some anxiety. Okay, I know my child has different needs. What do I do about it? So from our perspective in a therapeutic standpoint, the earlier that you get an assessment from neurodevelopmental psychologists, occupational therapy, speech, physical therapy, all these developmental specialists, the better that it is to know like what your child's needs are. And then from there, you can get involved in early Head Start programs through Florida.
Early educational intervention. You can get early intervention for therapies, just kind of get the ball rolling for assisting your child in their needs as a whole to make them more independent.
Definitely. And then from there, there's locally for us is FDLRS, Fiddlers, that you can call, I think at age 3.
Yes.
Right. So age 3, I would, we recommend getting as many resources on board as possible. And then in that case, they can assist with development of an IEP program. You can go to early BPK, get some early intervention in therapy in that respect as well. That way you're set up for success as you're entering into
the school
system. Now, the flip side, let's say I have a 16-year-old that we missed all of that, or, there weren't any needs identified at that time. But now my 16-year-old is really struggling to focus during his AP classes or whatever it is. We're showing signs of fidgeting. And do you think that's too late to get help?
No, not at all. The way that we found, at least here in Florida, when it comes to the school system and getting the assistance that you need, that side of things at that age is, as a parent, you would have to advocate, whether it be in writing or email, to the specialist that is at the school, the ESE specialist. And once you have expressed your concerns, then it's their job to look into what's going on, whether it be underlying learning issues or difficulty paying attention. And then it's their job to kind of narrow down and figure out exactly what's going on and what services that the school could provide to help your child in those aspects. As far as on a therapeutic side of things, early intervention, we always say is, let's hit it hard in the beginning so they don't always need it throughout their lives. But it doesn't mean that things aren't going to change. These children, especially when they hit puberty, their bodies change, the work gets harder in school, paying attention gets harder.
Brain chemistry is
always changing. And there's always different things that we're learning as therapists that we can always help our children and our patients as they move throughout the different aspects of their lives to help them be as independent as possible and to navigate those different changes in their body and in their brain chemistry and all of that. Last and final question for this podcast is we've seen this in our practice, and we did have some questions about, is it necessary to get a diagnosis?
Right. Okay. And that, it does seem, it's a big thing, right? In the diagnosis key of it, whether you get a diagnosis of autism or ADHD, OCD, whatever, giftedness, right? It can be daunting and it can be a stigma. That's what we talk about, like why we are so affirming in our practice is because we want to take away that stigma, but we do realize that there still is a stigma with labeling. However, in terms of, is it necessary? It's not necessary. No. However, we do recommend going through formalized testing to receive a diagnosis because you end up getting more resources, right? You end up being able to have a piece of paper that you can take to the school and saying, my child has, this diagnosis and requires these accommodations. And it's a lot.
And that's ultimately what the school does in their own manner. So if a child does not have a medical diagnosis, if as a family you don't want a medical diagnosis and you go to the school asking for help, they on the back end do all of their psychological testing and it's a school diagnosis, which becomes separate from. So you're still able to get the services, but they do go through the process of figuring out if there is something that could provide education and resources as far as a label. It doesn't necessarily mean that that label is with a child throughout their life or throughout the world. It's just in the educational setting, this is the understanding as to why they need this extra support and services.
And on the flip side of this too, about, the diagnosis and is it necessary? Is it something that I really need for my child? And again, I think a diagnosis helps support discussions about why my brain is different. My brain is different because I have ADHD and I like to hyper focus on things. So I may lose details of something else. It explains why I'm doing things. Because a lot of times research is finding that children that are like growing into adults, and I can actually speak to this personally, you think something is wrong with your brain. You're like, why is this so difficult for me, right? It's taking me extra time, or I'm just having to like refocus myself all the time, and you think something's wrong with you. When really, there's nothing wrong. You just have a different brain. But having that diagnosis and that support of being able to kind of advocate for yourself, I'm like, oh, get that realization.
Makes sense.
This makes sense, right? And now I just know I need XYZ to accommodate, whatever is different with my brain.
And on the opposite side of that coin too, is for someone who is neurodiverse, having a community or having people who understand, may not necessarily be neurodiverse themselves, which, we kind of all are a little neurodiverse, but just having someone understand what neurodiversity is, the different components of it helps you better understand when someone is, say, for example, you're telling a story and someone repeats a similar story. It's not because they're trying to be rude, they're trying to relate to you. So having the understanding and the education on each one of the different aspects of neurodiversity helps you better understand the world and the people that are in it.
I think one thing we did want to recap too in terms of neurodiversity and a neurodiversity affirming practice that we wanted to share with the community is, from our practice here at Seaside, we are neurodiversity affirming and we very much value that.
Yes.
But if, you're not local to us or you can't see us, we'd love for you to find other neurodiversity affirming practices in your community. And so we we're going to get some resources out there for you too, but like kind of 7 principles of what that would look like, what you could ask your therapist to be or your providers in terms of what does it mean to be neurodiversity
if your provider is not on the realm of neurodiversity affirming or doesn't know about it, you can help to spread the word and educate.
So we'll go through them, but like the principles of like a neurodiversity affirming practice. Number 1 would be autonomy. So what we mean by that is the child is right? So we're not here to fix the child. The child is who they are and who they're meant to be. So we're still going to let them be their own person. Our job is to take their strengths and to cater to that, right?
Yes.
But we're not forcing a child to do anything. We're letting them be their best person, be their, bring in their special interests, bring in their things that they love to talk about. Like we respect the person. So that's number 1 is autonomy.
Number 2 is presuming competence. So we are looking at what we are competent in doing and kind of making sure that we are not diminishing any of their abilities.
Exactly. So say you have a child or an adult with Down syndrome. They have a different functioning brain, neurodiverse as well. And again, like to recap too, the few diagnoses that we do mention, like that is not all encompassing.
No.
Any type of syndrome or diagnosis diagnosis can actually contribute to neurodiversity. So there's just knowing that it's not just inclusive of autism and ADHD, right? It goes way beyond that. So back to, in terms of presuming competence, you may come across like a child or an adult with Down syndrome that's non-speaking. My thing of presuming competence is, even though you're not speaking to me, I'm presuming that you're understanding everything that's coming out of my mouth, that you're understanding what's going on in the world around you. I'm presuming that you are like me, right? I am not assuming something because of your diagnosis, assuming you're less than, assuming things that you cannot do. I assume that you can do all things until we discover that maybe you need some help, right? So that's presuming competence, right? In our perspective. Number 3, taking a strength-based approach. This is something that we've talked about as clinicians that we're still kind of monitoring and reflecting on, because the things that we learned in graduate school are very different from the appropriate way things should be. So we like to use a strength-based approach as opposed to saying, my child only eats blue Pop-Tarts every day. It's the only thing he eats. Okay, well, my child has a strong preference for the color blue and textures, and maybe need more exposure to alternate foods or textures or things like that. So kind of reframing things, right?
Reframing and rephrasing too, like looking at in terms of play. We're talking about play for a little bit today. And, my child lines up all their toys. Well, we can reframe that and rephrase that in a manner of, my child enjoys organizing their toys in this manner. And we are trying to take away the negative vocabulary and the negative terminology of is struggling with, is, we're not focusing on what they can't do, but we're looking at what they can do and how can we build on those skills to add in all of these other skills that might necessarily need a little bit more help.
Exactly. And if taking those strengths of, my child loves to organize toys. All right, if your child loves to organize toys, I'm going to do that in therapy, and I'm going to add on extra things onto that task. I'm not going to say, that's not the way we play with our toys. We're going to dive in right where your child's at. We're going to meet them because that's their strength, right? And then we're going to add our challenges.
Play with my toys that way.
Yeah. I still like to line up I have little alpacas from Peru right now.
Number 4, the 4th principle is respecting all communication styles. And I think this is a big one for us because we even talk about how behaviors are a form of communication, and we need to respect that those behaviors are there and the child is, or person is, trying to communicate something to you in their own manner, whether it be grunting, pointing, signing, a communication device, verbalizing, written word. It's all a form, singing. It's all a form of communication. And we as clinicians and as a community need to respect that style of communication.
Definitely. And that's something we as a practice really respect. A lot of, even from a speech perspective, a lot of my goals have switched to, will requesting communication in a multimodal form, which would be just that. Is it verbal? Is it via speech device? Is it sign? Is it all of them? We accept it all and we love it all and we support all of those things. There is a lot of kind of confusion around that. Well, I want my child to be verbal. I understand that, but actually using all these other forms of communication actually enhance and engage all forms of language and promote verbal language on the back end. So it's a really cool thing. Not only is the child able to communicate however they want, they are still getting those verbal skills too.
And even in our sessions with our kiddos, we're using more than one mode. We assume that you can do all modes, like we said. We're presuming competence. So we are using not only the speech device and sign and verbal language and written language. We're trying to hit all aspects of it in the hopes that one or two or even all of them will be your form of communication. So that way we can all be able to navigate each other.
This is such a rabbit hole. Let's do another podcast.
Oh, sorry.
Number 5 is
being informed by neurodiverse voices.
Yeah. So this is a big one. This is something in the past few years I've kind of dived into because a lot, especially from our perspective as therapists, a lot of our education has come from a research or based background or professors or research studies. But being neurodiversity affirming means that you're respecting what people who actually are neurodiverse are saying. So getting involved, and I know even both of us are like in different groups that are run by autistic people, that they will give you like, this is what I prefer. I prefer to be called autistic, or I prefer to be non-speaking versus nonverbal. And you get this feedback from a perspective that I, can't relate to exactly, right?
And I think too, just getting into that mindset of being informed by others who are neurodiverse and who do have they are living it day in and day out, just shows a level of respect and understanding that, it's not always what you say. Sometimes it's how you say it, and it may be with the best of intentions, but someone else might take it in the wrong way. So just keeping yourself informed by others in the community of different changes and trends that are happening with those different populations is always, for me, the best way.
Definitely. Absolutely.
caring for others.
All right. We've got
Number 6 is individualized care. And, we always do that. You are your own person. So we want to make sure that your therapy or your interpretation and interaction in the world is yours and it's different from everybody else's.
The same, we have a 2-year-old, let's say a 2-year-old that I evaluate this morning is going to be completely different from a 2-year-old that I see tomorrow.
Yep.
So and a part of a neurodiversity affirming practice is that you respect the individual and you cater to that individual because their care plan is going to look very different. And this is not a therapy factory, right? We don't do the same thing for every child because it just doesn't work. It's not appropriate.
Well, and not everything and every treatment approach or every tactic is going to work for each child. So it's individualizing what that child likes and dislikes and how we can go ahead and again build off of those skills to incorporate the other things that they're struggling with. So that way we individualize it for that child, which may be different from Johnny or Bobby, whoever, and making sure that we are catering to the child. And number 7 is honoring neurodiverse culture.
Yes, and I think that's something that we do here. Well, obviously, we're
i.e. the podcast.
Yes, that, and even just supporting the community, supporting your neurodiversity community, going out, getting involved, volunteering, doing walks, even down to watching like Love on the Spectrum, right? Like learning about that culture.
Don't get me
It's
started.
adorable. It's so adorable, right? So cute. But like those are important things, and it helps the world gain insight into each other's minds because that's what it is. Like we have to share these things and about why we're different and to learn to respect and empathize with others. And that's a beautiful way to do it by getting involved with their culture, right? Exciting stuff. Always excited to talk about neurodiversity and practices. If you have any more questions, let us know. But today we also are going to be talking about play, right? So play is how we navigate our therapeutic world with our children and how children learn through play. So we're going to talk today about some play interventions that are speech and language and more occupational therapy like focus and how you can integrate these things at your house. Let's see.
So when we talk about play in general in the occupational therapy world, play is an occupation. So we look at play as a goal for a child, and there's many different styles of play, and typically there is a developmental process through those styles. And just to touch on a couple of them, there's individualized play. I'm over here with my toy and nobody else is in my field of vision and I'm doing this by myself. There's parallel play where I'm playing with blocks here and Johnny's over here and he's playing with cars and we're sitting next to each other, but we're not interacting with one another. There's interactive play where now we're playing 2 of us or 3 of us with the same item. There's imaginative play where we are creating things and stories. And, this is where we see a lot of like the dress ups and playing kitchen and imitating our parents. So those are just a couple of the styles of play that occupational therapy kind of works on as one of our child's occupations. And as we grow and as we get older, we look at those play occupations more as like hobbies and more of the things that help us relax as our older population and growing into adults.
Like my crochet now.
Yeah. Or knitting or sewing or puzzles or
exercise.
All those things start out in the occupational therapy world as looking at the hierarchy of play and how we're moving through that and then going on into adulthood. So just my little spiel about play.
I love it. All relative things. So we're going to each talk about some kind of skills to keep an eye on as you're doing play related to both speech and occupational therapy. So speech and language specific things to keep in mind anytime you're doing play. This is kind of reverting back to something we said earlier, but respecting any form of communication during play. So if my child is pointing or like requesting, I want to pay attention, right? I want to respect that. I'm not going to ignore them because they're not saying mommy or they're not coming to tap me and bring me over. I'm respecting everything that they're doing in terms of communication and responding back. So they're learning to make that link between, okay, if I do something, whether it's a movement, a sound, a word, and a sign, right? We have to respect that and give that feedback back so that the child knows this is how communication works. It's a back and forth type of thing, cause and effect relationship. The other thing, to remember is that there might be some common issues that you're seeing that are maybe impacting the play skills. If those things to monitor for would be like a non-interest, like Danielle was saying, like, is it that they're not interested in communicating, or is it that they're playing individualized play and they're really into brushing their doll's hair and they don't want to have anything to do with you in that moment? And that's okay.
Yes.
So there's that. There's reduced verbal language, which is a big, source of referrals for early language intervention, but kind of identifying those things. Are they wanting to engage with you? Are they only using pointing? Are they only using one form of communication. That might be a barrier, right? You'd want to start using different forms, having that joint attention and that reciprocal play. If you are at that level of play, and remembering, Danielle just went over this, if you aren't at that level of play where you go back and forth or you have that joint attention, we're both looking at this, you got it, right? If you're not there, you may need to do some groundwork to get to that level, right?
Yes.
So these are all things that kind of play right on top of each other. Play. Techniques to use while you're playing for speech. Narration. Love this one. You literally feel like you're talking to yourself with these children. And I can even grab my little phone here. Wow, mommy has her phone. It's green right here. Oh, it's hard. It's hard. Oh, that would hurt if I dropped it, right? So I'm narrating things because the more vocabulary and the more modeling that you give, the better receptive language skills are going to be picking up those words and those phrases and linking objects to words, as well as, again, being an active participant in play. If your child is wanting to play with you, not just kind of passively like, there you go, there's some blocks. I need to sit down with my child and we need to be stacking together. We need to be labeling together. We want to do things together to have active play.
Well, because we're talking about play in the form of it being a learning opportunity. And who do our children learn the most from is from our modeling. And we talk kind of building off as modeling play. So where we as OTs, we actually carry in a lot of that narration, a lot of the language into our play as well, but we're also modeling play. So
the physical aspect.
If we see that a child is struggling or having some difficulties with the language aspect of it or the non-interest, I'm going to be over here stacking my blocks and I'm narrating how much fun I'm having and wow, and then it crashes. And, Johnny's over here in the corner of my eye and we are doing our separated play. We're not parallel playing. He's individualized over there. I'm individualized over here. But what I'm doing sparks his interest. Okay, so now we're sparking interest and now we're going to try to model what it is the task that I am actively wanting the child to learn just by me doing it. And again, we're trying to navigate styles of play and making sure that we're modeling those things and making sure that we're giving the child our attention in that moment. I know sometimes it's hard, these busy lives that we lead, but taking the time, all of the things, taking the time to just sit down and take a moment and interact with play.
Yeah, and even if it's like at the point of we're watching Miss Rachel together, not passively watching, but maybe pausing and saying, wow, Miss Rachel's talking about colors. Look, my chair's pink, just like Miss Rachel's couch was, like engaging even in those tablet type things, right, too. And then you also mentioned modeling, where one of our big things is modeling without expectation, right? So as I'm talking about those blocks, my expectation is going to be like stack, stack, stack. Okay, now you say stack, right? That's not what we do. We pause, maybe do like this is a great strategy, right? A meaningful pause or a powerful pause. The idea is to give 8 to 10 seconds to respond. And that's a lot of time and it feels very painful when you're wanting to like carry on with your day.
Please pay attention.
But the children, their brains need the time to process. And so we're modeling what we're wanting to do and we're not stopping and we're demanding them to do it. We're modeling and then we'll be surprised over time, they're going to do it with you. But that's a critical thing of, again, neurodiversity practice is that we don't say, you're going to do this now or demand that. We're setting up the opportunity for communication and then the play, but it's without an expectation.
Right. And then with that also is noting as we graduate through those styles of play and say, for example, we are getting into more imaginative play, more dress up play. This is a great opportunity for us as adults to allow the child to practice certain skills that they're learning. For example, getting dressed and dressing themselves. I understand as a mom in the morning, got to get out the door, got to hurry up. We got things to do.
Let me do for you.
Usually the parent will do for, and the skills tend to get lost in the shuffle of your morning. So we always say, when you're playing, practice those skills. When we're getting dressed up like Elsa or a pirate, you're working on putting the shirt on, navigating those buttons. Those are all therapeutic skills and daily life skills that they'll need throughout their life that they're practicing while they're playing.
Well, it sounds like giving that extra time is kind of like my powerful pause, right? Give them time to do themselves. I'm so guilty too. Like if I'm working on feeding, I'm the first to help feed and I'm like, oh, Danielle's in the background. Let him do it. I'm like, but it takes so much longer, right?
Yes.
But it's part of them learning.
And then also kind of working on turn taking without expectations and also that communication understanding everyone's communication is different. So if I'm working with a child and we're at that stage of interactive play and turn taking, and we're working on my turn versus your turn, and we're trying to promote the language and trying to promote gestures, we always do a my turn, your turn kind of thing. And then the more that I'm modeling that, we see they start repeating it. So just kind of building off of the play skills and the skills to incorporate, like we said in the beginning, neurodiversity. We're incorporating all of the skills into their likes, not necessarily their dislikes, because then we get avoidance and refusal, but trying to incorporate all the different things that we know throughout their lifetime they're going to need these skills into the form of play at whatever level they're at.
So now we can kind of touch on functional. You've already mentioned some functional daily things to incorporate at home for play and using these skills. So in terms of speech, some kind of different activities you could do. So morning routines, they could be practicing our sounds as we're getting ready in the morning. And we're gonna overlap so much, right? I'll use the thing of like as you're getting dressed, right? Like just singing like your head, shoulders, knees, and toes songs. So you're linking those body parts with like where the clothes are going, or practicing certain sounds, like making funny sounds together, pop, 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 as we're like, buttoning or whatever it is, gamifying things, making it funny words and things like that. During bath time, using toys to target different verbs. So having like your rubber ducky swims, rubber ducky jumps, rubber ducky bathes, right? Like we're using these functional, fun toys to engage language.
Rubber ducky washes their hair. So child can wash their hair. It's again building off of those skills to try to get them to engage. One thing I do say is, like, especially for our school age kids, they spend their whole day in an environment where they're having to sit and learn and take in all this information. And sometimes for them, especially if they struggle with education and learning, it's hard. And if you take those skills and those learned aspects of their life and you turn it into play and you make it fun, they're more willing to engage in those tasks, but then also it helps with the carryover of skills.
Exactly.
So soapbox down.
Yeah. Another thing that's great for both feeding and communication skills, and of course fine motor, would be doing meal prep. So naming your ingredients. I'm making a sandwich. I see bread. I see ham. I see cheese, and then working on sequencing of the steps. First bread, then cheese, then ham. It's up for debate, but whichever way you'd like to do it.
It's up for debate.
But like those are things like following directions too. So all of those functional things are promoting language and fine motor skills, right?
Well, and then not only that, you're looking at higher level ADL, IADL skills with caring for themselves when they get older. Johnny has to get off the bus and they need a snack, so they now know how to make a sandwich with all the ingredients that would not be harmful to the home.
Right. In terms of specific to like storytelling is always great for language development. Narrating, I'm always have to have a literacy piece. Like even if it's a baby and they're not really attending to words or know what a word is, an abstract thing, it's getting that early exposure to this is what a page, it turns, I need to look here, it means something is happening. So all of these are functional skills and they seem, again, very simple, but if you're doing it in an engaging way, it's going to set your child up for success.
Right. And then on the OT side of storytelling and narrating, we can work on the fine motor aspect of turning the pages, holding the book two hands, one hand. How are we grasping? How are we turning the page?
Visual scanning, right?
Visual scanning, visual tracking, looking at colors and letters, and all of that will then translate when we get to higher level visual motor, visual perception, and even handwriting at the end of the day.
And another just kind of functional communication related thing would be, of course, using music. I love music and language loves music too. Music is very, very powerful. Research has proven over and over again. It's powerful for calming, for regulation. It's powerful for language. It really gets you going, right? Like I could have a child that's completely not interested and then you put Baby Shark on, they are up, they're moving, they're engaged, and that's focusing on language. It's focusing on joint attention. It's focusing on so many things. So I am always pro music at all times throughout the day, linking it ADLs to like create positive play too.
Yeah. And on the sensory side of things too, we look at music. I was just talking about this the other day, music sets the mood. So if you're watching a movie and it's got a very somber music background, you're feeling those feelings and emotions. And especially for our kids, they feel a lot of it. Mm-hmm. So if we have a song or like you said, that's uplifting, it's going to get them up. It's going to raise their arousal level. It's going to help them engage. It's going to get them moving, get the blood flowing and help with attention and focus and all the other things.
All right. So you have some specific OT home-based things, maybe? I think we mentioned
I
dressing.
I've squirreled. I'm not paying attention to this at all.
It's like going down the rabbit hole. All right. So we talked about doing like dress up.
Oh, yeah. So some of the things too that we can make creative and inventive for our kids to help promote those learning. And we were talking about sensory bins, creating themes in our bins. So if you have just a little area, whether it be like a laundry basket or something that you can put items in, it doesn't necessarily have to be sand. It doesn't necessarily have to be beans. It could be a basket of items that are different textures, different consistencies, things that they're able to touch and play with that would give them that different sensations on their hands,
Maybe like blocks
smells,
and like stuffies.
Yes. So just kind of getting them to start being creative with the tools that they see and in playing in a manner that has no expectations. I'm literally, my play is touching this and we'll see what kind of comes of it. Crafting is always fun. I know there are a lot of resources out there for making crafts educational and using toilet paper tubes to fine motor pinch and drop down the tube. And it's fun, like a marble goes down the hole, and kids get really engaged with that. And then they're even more engaged when it's something they've created themselves. And okay, I've taken this part and I've colored it and I've put it together, and wow, look what I've made. And it is working on all these skills that we're talking about. One thing that I love, and I don't speak for everyone, but I love being outside. I'm here in Florida. It does get hot over the summer, but still it's good for your body. And one of the biggest things that I like to encourage is just going out to a playground. There are many different things that the playground can provide for your child when we're looking at play and sensory and integrating into all of these different skills that we're trying to encourage and promote. The climbing, the swinging, we're looking at balance, we're looking at motor planning, we're looking at my ability to navigate around these different things. And most of our playgrounds here in Florida got rid of the sand as their base. So there's wood chips, there's sand, there's little rubber pieces, and all of those are different textures. All those are different things for us as clinicians and parents to work on being able to tolerate on our hands and even our feet. I know playgrounds, we usually keep our shoes and socks on, but sometimes it's fun to take our shoes and socks off and just put our feet and kind of figure it out.
Nice. And I think a lot of these things can kind of combine between speech, language, and fine motor sensory skills. We can do a lot of things together. For example, doing scavenger hunts, right? Like being outside. Yes. Like we'll make a list, and we like to do like nature walks together, right? Like, oh, let's find something that's green. Oh my gosh, the grass, that is green. You're right. Let's find something that's hard, right? Oh, a tree. Yeah, that's hard. And then you're doing all the sensory things as well as pairing it with the language things too. It's a beautiful thing.
And I'll even say too, from a parent perspective, scavengers hunts are fun in the stores as well. If you prep before you're going and you have a little list, it helps to keep your child occupied and engaged while you're navigating your shopping process or doing different things. And it helps kind of that process along. And it also teaches them the ability to, follow directions. And again, looking on that visual scanning, fine motor, we're reading, we're navigating, we're matching pictures, colors, different things like that. So it's bringing in all of those learned skills into daily activities in their environment.
Right. And even talked about imaginative play. So too, like creating those scenarios at home, if we can't be out, like prepping for like we're playing doctor, right? That's going to get us mentally prepped for maybe our pediatrician in 2 weeks. That maybe causes some stress.
Or playing airplane because we're going on vacation.
Exactly. So using those things to talk about the language and the vocabulary related to going to the doctor, related to going on a trip and traveling, related to like things and words they may hear frequently or experiences they're going to have, and then doing the physical motions by acting it out of what's going to happen. These are great ways to incorporate these skills into your day-to-day life.
Yes.
Right. And again, like we realize life is hard. Life is like rushing all the time. But even if you can sit down with your child 5 to 10 minutes a day at the end of night, whether it's at a calm time, whether it's in like a really busy time in the morning, if you want to carve out some time, like just having that one-on-one time with your child or with your family is so important in their development, period. Right.
Yeah.
So those are definitely I feel like some things that you can pretty easily incorporate, right, into some specific play things at home and with peers and things like that. So we kind of talked about always using narration, using modeling without expectation, using multimodal communication, all of those sorts of things, always making play positive, right?
Yes,
trying to create
fun.
these positive experiences in terms of speech and language development skills. And then as far as occupational therapy, just recapping.
Same kind of concept, making sure that we're having fun, making sure that there's no pressure in our play, understanding that play looks different for everyone and there is different levels of play, modeling without expectation, modeling the skills, and just taking the time to set aside from your busy schedules to engage with your child. We know sometimes, we don't force eye contact, but kids have their way of communicating with you that they want to play or that they want your attention or engagement. So just taking the time and carrying over skills that you know they will need throughout their day, giving them the grace and patience to learn those skills, to make mistakes, to struggle, to get frustrated, and kind of navigate through all of that in a very positive, playful manner.
So we hope you learned a little bit today about how to incorporate some therapeutic skills into play at home and in the community and beyond. So we encourage you to try some of these activities, try some of the skills that we mentioned. Of course, if you have any questions or comments or any feedback, we'd love to hear back. You can reach out to us on YouTube or via Spotify or the socials, right? Waves of Wisdom. We'd love to have you follow along with us. Let's see, coming up in the next podcast, we have Miss Megan Koppel coming.
Very excited.
From Healthcare for Kids, PPEC. So we're going to learn about what a PPEC is, what kind of opportunities and resources they have for our medically fragile children. So that's exciting. So we'd love for y'all to tune in for that. And let's also always support inclusivity together. Please like and subscribe to our YouTube channel, Waves of Wisdom. Follow us on Spotify, Waves of Wisdom, and connect with us on Instagram. Until our next Learn and Laugh session, take care and bye.
Bye.
Take home Seaside vibes. Shop our Seaside Therapy merch now. Make a splash in your well-being and ride the tide of neurodiversity to a healthier, happier life. Subscribe today and surf the wisdom wave. Let's support inclusivity together.